the controversy was surrounding this incident, which happened immediately after the bounce for the third quarter. You see the score up there at this stage, 22 points behind. They're being outplayed, Essendon. Their captain, Matthew Lloyd, charged in off the centre square, and as a result of that, some pretty awful head injuries to Brad Sewell. And this melee ensued. Campbell Brown was caught up in it. He eventually came off with a blood rule, ended up getting 4 stitches. We'll hear some of his controversial words. What about it, Tomo? Your initial thoughts when you saw it? What do you think?
Oh, look, it's unfortunate for Sewell, obviously, because he's been knocked out, but I don't think it was premeditated in any way, shape or form. I think that it's not a despicable act, and you'd think that 6 weeks is akin to a despicable act. It's just it was a bump up the middle, got him head high, knocked out, couple of weeks, move on.
Look, that ball's in dispute right there. Matthew Lloyd's got his eyes still on the footy right at that stage, and once Sewell gathered it, then he had to change and look up. Now, the other thing I've heard a lot about is that he charged in off the square. Now, I'm not sure whether we noticed it or whether we can get it up again. I'm sorry, but he didn't come charging in off the square, Matthew Lloyd. You can see him in the background with his opponent's show-makers. He sort of took 2 or 3 tentative steps, and then the ball came, and then he went at the footy. Now, what he did is he made the head-eye contact, and given the current environment, he had to go. I think 6 weeks is heavy-handed, myself.
You can't do it, though, can you? I mean, he went front on and he clicked me in the head. And the head.
There's balls in dispute there, Archie. He's got his head
but
at the footy.
But he goes straight at him front on.
Then he made the wrong decision in the space of 1.5 metres.
A week earlier we saw that you had a message sent to the whole community.
That happens, mate. It's a game of footy.
You can't do it.
It's wrong. I know, I'm putting my hand up and saying you can't do it in the current environment. But I won't accept that he came out after half-time and stood at that centre square and said, I'm just going to pick the first bloke off I see. I don't accept that, especially not seeing that. And I just don't reckon it's a 6-week crime.
But I also believe that the coach would have said something to the players at half-time about firing up. And even at quarter time, we saw Scott Camporeale getting stuck into Nathan Lovett-Murray in a physical way. They wanted a more physical performance from the Bombers.
There's no way known that any coach of Essendon or Hawthorn, with emerging into finals this week, would have told their players to go out and do something that may have been outside the rules.
No, I agree with that. And what we see now is Essendon perhaps going to Adelaide without some pretty important players.
Indeed. And look, this was hot on the field. It heated up again, and this was the precursor to some pretty powerful words. Campbell Brown on Triple M Radio, we spoke to him shortly after the end of the game. Now, he was involved in the melee. He's got some history with Matthew Lloyd over the journey, and this is what he had to say.
Mate, we're not going to forget in a hurry what Matty Lloyd did, and, I hope he plays on next year.
How will you view that when you stack it up against Buddy and Cousins last week?
Oh, look, it's for everyone to see. I was out there and I thought it was pretty similar. So, like I said, Matty Lloyd, he's done that a fair few times to us, and I think he's one of the biggest snipers in the game, so his time's coming.
Are you suggesting then that Buddy sniped Ben Cousins last week?
Absolutely not.
So how do you differentiate between the two?
I'm not going to go there, Gary.
Well, it's a good question you asked, Gary. No doubt about that. Put it back on Campbell Brown. A lot of history between Brown and, of course, goes back to 2005 and that famous game, the line in the sand game. What do you make of that?
Oh, look, it sounds impressive, but I don't know what Campbell Brown's going to do next year that he couldn't have done in the ensuing moments after that incident.
They were expecting it.
I don't know what he's threatening to do, whether he's threatening to walk up to Lloydie and smack him in the gob next year or whatever. But, look, it sounds impressive. It's a lot of passion, a lot of energy. I've made for good listening, made for good vision on television, watching him like a cage lion on the boundary line ready to get at him. Look, no one can doubt his courage and his everything else with Brown. He's a fantastic in that regard. But, look, I think it's idle threats.
Look, and given the Franklin thing that had happened the week before, now whether you say it's exactly the same or not, there are similarities enough there to wonder about double standards in all this. And I think Campbell got himself into a little bit of trouble in that particular interview, and I can understand how that happens after a game. But it did, there was a response from the Essendon Footy Club that I thought was really strong and supportive of their player. And it started with this man, Paul Hamilton, their football manager.
Our concerns are one, the attack on his integrity and his character. 2, the veiled threats that have been made. 3, the prejudicial comments in terms of the tribunal hearing that will happen this week. And 4, the appalling set of double standards that have come through.
I think Campbell's not too bad a sniper himself either, so...
After a loss, you've got to be careful what you do say in the media because you are emotional and that sort of stuff. I just think you got to make sure that your own backyard's clean.
And the reality is that Matthew Lloyd is far from a sniper. So, you know, we were really disappointed in that comment.
That was Matthew Knights just moments ago. It was a pretty strong defence of their player, Grant.
Well, if Matthew Lloyd hurt Brad Sewell, I think Paul Hamilton's comments really knocked the club out. I think it was a sensational statement, measured, considered, really strong, professional.
They were not so measured, the Hawks, straight after the game, Hutchie.
No, Alastair Clarkson was angry, emotioned on the ground. Today he softened his position somewhat, Alastair, and he went public on SEN radio to his version of an apology.
Sometimes your emotions get the better of you, and it's not an excuse. And in most cases we're able to rein ourselves in, but on this particular occasion, both Campbell and myself are probably the two most significant culprits at our club. One of the guys that copped the full brunt of my displeasure was Wispy's son, and I've known Job for a long period of time, and I think he was shaping up to come and shake my hand, and with my blood boiling, it was the last thing I wanted to do. And if I was going to be accommodating of any Essendon player, it would have been Job Watson, but I didn't even want to speak to him. So making it a bit of a peanut that I'm so passionate about my footy, I suppose.
Wears his heart on his sleeve, Caroline. We've seen it firsthand along the journey, you and I.
And we have in this very studio. How many times, Craig, and how many apologies for that sort of behaviour? I'm sorry, but Gary's made a big calls in recent times, as many of us had, with junior footy and ugly parents and ugly coaches. Seeing a coach do what he did and have to be physically restrained after a game when he's verbally attacking a footballer is just not on. I know we've seen Kevin Sheedy do something like that. We've seen David Parkin remonstrate with the Spectator. It's not like it's unheard of. But he went on in that interview to then have another crack at Matthew Lloyd. I just thought it was too little too late. Very unimpressive exit from this season by the Hawthorn Football Club administration.
Dermot Brereton also weighed into it tonight, revealing he'd called Matthew Lloyd.
I said to him, Matthew, what you did was extraordinary. I'll call a spade. Not going as well as you would like. You're going to find it hard to get off whatever's coming your way. But be proud of what you did. I think you're a champion bloke as well as a champion player. So keep your head up high.
Well, there's Dermot Brereton, who... hard for Derm to take any other line, I would have thought. Otherwise, he would have had hypocrite written all over him. He was hard and tough, and back in another era, was charging off the square, and anyone that was inside that square was fair game, and they were the rules of the day, so that was fine as well.
As opposed to Alastair Clarkson, who's never hit anyone in his life.
Well, look, I was going to go really hard on Alastair as well, and I listened to that interview this morning.
Put his hand up this morning, and all you can do.
I'm not absolutely condoning it, but I think in this industry, and I've done it myself, not so much like that, but even in this environment, done some things, and you just think, when you cool down, as long as you're man enough to at least put your hand up, and he did. He did say that he was,
disappointing. It was disappointing. He did try to call Tim and obviously wanted to address the Job situation. That was fine. He then went on to have another crack at Matthew Lloyd. And the bottom line is Hawthorn have been very poor sports and very sore losers, and it has not been a good look for a club that prides itself on the opposite.
I do agree with that.
Well, it came from the president, Jeff Kennett, as well, and I know you've got some strong thoughts on Jeff in this. This is what he had to say.
In the game last night between the Bulldogs and Collingwood, the Bulldog player Cross and the Collingwood player McCarthy collided with a shocking head contact, so brutal that one actually had to leave the ground. The rule currently, as applied, says that if there was a chance to avoid or to tackle, if contact was made, even accidentally, that is an infringement. And in this case, these two players, given that the precedent has been set with Buddy Franklin, these players are out for 2 weeks.
Both players, Jeff?
Absolutely.